Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Anarchist podcast. This is episode 4, and this episode is going to be a really, really good one. We're going to talk about a number of really touchy issues that not a lot of people like to talk about, and I like to talk about the issues that people don't like to talk about because I feel they need to be talked about. And this episode, we're going to be talking about feminization of men, racism, IQ between the races, MRA versus feminism and feminists. We're going to talk about the transsexuals and the tranny issue going on right now with Caitlyn Jenner and all this talk about that. We're going to talk about abortion. So this episode is definitely going to strengthen my core of followers and weed out all the people that I will piss off or rub the wrong way with this information. But this podcast is all about seeking truth and knowledge, and I've come to these conclusions by seeking truth and knowledge, by analyzing the facts, doing the research, and this is what I've came to. Now, if you guys disagree with that, that's fine. Leave your disagreements in the comment section below. I welcome criticism. But these are my opinions, my views, and I don't really care what you think. Podcast is about what I think about them. So, and just so happens that I seek truth and logic for the time, and these are the answers that I came to when I did so in these areas of study. So first, let's start off with MRA, men's rights, versus the feminist. The feminism, because I've been on a kick lately watching a lot of this stuff, because we've seen brought to the forefront once again the issue of the gender pay gap. And the gender pay gap, any economist, anyone with any sense who has looked at the data completely can debunk the gender pay gap. It is a myth. And I'm going to give you guys some statistics on why right now. Now, commonly you hear thrown around in the public mainstream media that women make 70 cents on the dollar as men. And, it's patriarchy. Oh, men are enslaving women. We don't let them do, and we don't pay them as much. And this is absolutely absurd for multiple reasons. But one of the most logical and simple answers I can come to, before I get into all the statistics and facts, is that if this were the case, that we were living in a society where women that are actually more qualified for the jobs are getting paid less, then why don't we see businesses filled with women? Wouldn't it be more profitable for a company to hire a bunch of women who are equally as qualified, but you can pay 70 cents on the dollar? What would be the motive and incentive for a company to hire a man and his patriarchy and his white privilege when they have to pay him 30 cents more? It just, as an economist, as a business owner sense, a person thinking like that would never hire men if that were the situation, if there was a genuine gender pay gap. So immediately that was one of the things that I come to a conclusion with at an early stage before I started actually looking into the facts. And now we'll get into that right now. So why women tend to get paid less and are 70 cents or 80 cents, depending where you're located, on the dollar as men, is because a number of things come into play with that. First off, you must look at how they come up with this number. Now, they come up with this number by taking a broad stroke approach. They basically poll all of the women, all of the men in full-time jobs, and they add up the salaries, and they see that, men have a bigger chunk of getting paid. But when they do that broad stroke of all of men, all of women in full-time jobs, they don't look at a lot of the little things that contribute to that and what make up that 70 cents on the dollar. And some of those things are, which I will start to talk about. So one of the things is, obviously the most common sense thing, is women have children. They have babies. And when you're working in a career And if you get knocked up and you start a family, which is not a bad thing. For me, I guess I'm an old school guy. I think it's the most beautiful thing a woman can do. And people would call me sexist for this. And it's crazy. But I think the most beautiful thing a woman can do is raise a child. You're literally giving birth to the next generation. You are giving birth to the human species and creating, evolving us and keeping us going and keeping the species going. Men can't do that. We give you guys sperm and whatnot. It's obviously two to tango. But women are extremely valuable because they can give us, they have that reproduction aspect. So one of the major reasons why women seem to get paid less when you look at wages on a whole is because a lot of women will start and have a kid, which will require them to take leave. They'll have to go have the baby, whether they come back in a couple years to their job or not. They still have to take time off to have that child. And that right there is a number where also some of that money plays an effect, and where the 70 cents on the dollar comes into effect, because women are having babies. Now, feminists will scream and holler and say, well, what about the single, strong women who aren't having any children and are still having the 70 cents on the dollar? Well, there are also a number of issues, and the women having children is only one, and I'm going to get into some more now. So another thing is, when you poll on average, women take more time off work. That's just a fact. Now, I'm talking in general terms here. So yes, there may be a feminist or some woman listening to me right now who says, I work harder and more than most men around me. And maybe you do. And you're the above average. I'm talking in general terms here. And all this podcast today is talking in general terms. And when you talk in general terms, people like to label you racist, misogynist, or whatever the case may be, when it's not the facts. So as I was saying, women take more time off work. Also, another thing that plays into effect of the 70 cents to the dollar is men are, depending on the studies, 4 to 8 times more likely to negotiate their wages and negotiate a raise. So men are more likely to go in and ask their boss for a higher pay and for a raise. Women don't do that. We're talking about averages. Is there a woman listening to the podcast who's probably asked her boss for a raise? Yes. But like I said, we're talking in averages. So on average, men ask for raises more often. So there's another key role of the 70 cents to the dollar. Another thing that plays effect, and one of the most ones, I think one of the major ones that why for the 70 cents to a dollar, is women don't work in the highest paying jobs. When you look at high school, college majors, and you look at the highest paying jobs like petroleum engineering, math and computer sciences, aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, mineral and mining engineering, these are all college majors that are very high paying. And I'm going to now read the stats for you. So for petroleum engineers, 87% of that field is dominated by men. Math and computer sciences, 67%. Aerospace and engineering, 88%. Mechanical engineer, 90%. Mineral and mining engineering, 90% male. So some of the highest paying jobs on the planet, men are working in them. That's also what contributes to the wage pay gap. Another thing is men tend to, and are more willing to, work in the more riskier and dangerous jobs. Also, an actual fact and stat is work-related deaths overwhelmingly are majority male. So usually when you work in a dangerous job, you usually get paid and compensated for that danger pay and sense and stuff like that. Those jobs tend to pay more, and that's what also contributes to this pay gap between the genders. So women have babies, women take more time off, men work in the more higher paying jobs. Men tend to work longer hours. It's another thing. Men are also more willing to move for a job. It's another thing. We're more willing to pick up and move around to go to a job. We work, like I said, work the more dangerous jobs. So these are a number, I think, of the major. There are probably some other small things that contribute to this pay gap. But I think those that I've just discussed are probably exactly debunking exactly why women make 70 cents to the dollar for men. It's not anything to do with sexism at all. It's women's choices. And I don't think we should condemn women for that. And these feminists, I don't even understand it, to be honest, because who wants to argue to be able to go to work and do the shit that men have to do? I mean, why does it become so bad in today's society, or looked down upon, for a woman to be a stay-at-home mom? That is probably one of the most, I would argue, the most important job on the planet is to be a mother. Not a single mother, because there are huge benefits of having a father figure, and studies have shown children with a father and have a stable family and have a marriage do way better than families that are divorced and have single mothers and stuff like that. So, but being a mother is definitely the most important job on the planet. Why? Well, you continue the existence of the human species. Taking the time off work to make sure your child is raised in a loving, nurturing home by his mom while his dad is out working, and coming home is still visiting and giving him that structure and bringing the bacon. I mean, that when that structure is played out, human species thrive. They do very well. And it's very discerning to me that nowadays that women look at being a stay-at-home mother as like a bad thing. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things a woman can do on the planet, is give birth and continue the species. And when feminists go on about how females got it so bad and men have it so good, let's just look at some of the other stats. Now we'll get into some other things about men are killed the most. Now, women will make the argument that, well, it's other men killing them. But still, let's look at these facts here. If men got it so good, men are killed the most. Men are more of the suicides. Men are majority of the homeless. Men are majority of the drug addicted. Men are majority of high school and college dropouts. Men are majority of the unemployed. So where is all this male privilege? Here's what I also like to argue when I see a feminist who talks about male privilege. When the Titanic ship was going down, who got on the lifeboats first? Was it male privilege? Or in any instance where the human species or cultures are met with any kind of scenario where they have to choose who goes on forth to prosper, it's usually women and children first. So the fact that there's this patriarchy and male privilege is absolutely absurd, because if we were ever put in situations where we had to make a life choice, usually the women and children come first. Always. Throughout history, it's always been that way. So it's disgusting to see women talk about male privilege. Meanwhile, they would be boarded on the ship and their lives would be saved first. And this is not a bad thing. As a male, I understand why it is like this. And it comes down to basic biology. It's the same reason why on a farm you have one bull calf and a bunch of other cows that he impregnates. One male can impregnate multiple females. So for the survival of our species, if we were in a situation, the Titanic's going down, the entire population of the planet's there on it, we would choose to have more women and children, or more females in that aspect, than males to survive, because less males could impregnate more females, and they'd be more prosperous and continue the generation. Whereas if we had a bunch more males versus females, we'd all be competing for that egg, and it just wouldn't work out as good. So it makes sense when the Titanic goes down to put the women and children first, to continue the survival of our species. It's just biology. So it's very, very, very weird to hear feminists and people scream about wage pay gap and patriarchy and males got it so good, when we hear all these stats that we're killed more, suicide more, homeless more, drug addicted more, dropout more, unemployed more, in prison more. Not to mention the family court system, which a lot of people don't want to talk about. The majority of custody battles always go to the women. Not saying that in some cases that's a bad thing, but in some cases it is, where the woman is worse off. But it usually always goes when the police are called. They usually come up in a domestic situation. They usually come and arrest the male first. Women wonder why chivalry's dead. I think Feminist has killed the chivalry movement. And it's why we are seeing a lot of men now, a lot of young men, never before in history, pulling out of the dating market. There's a whole MGTOW movement. Men, I guess, MGTOW, I don't even forget exactly what it means, but I guess it's like men who don't even want to date no more. They're just done. That the legal contract of marriage scares them, and the court it's in divorce and all that's scary. I think marriage is a great thing. It's very beneficial. Science has proven that it has beneficial effects to have a stable marriage home. It's better for the kid. But what I don't like is the legal contract of marriage, alimony, and all the other things that come with it. Feminists are all for equal rights, but yet they love alimony. Well, if you and the guy break up, get a fucking job, feminists. What you need alimony for, right? 50-50. Feminists are all for equal rights, but if a man hits a woman, it's very looked down upon, and of course it should be. We have a higher percentage of muscle mass. We're bigger, we're stronger. So please, feminists, you don't want equal 50-50 rights. We're not the exact same animals. We have differences. You have a vagina, I have a cock. You have eggs, I have sperm. Okay, we're different. Men are generally stronger. Women are generally more nurturing. And I hate how societies now is trying to blend this together, that there's no difference between a man and a woman. And it's going to bring me into the next issue, the next topic, which is the transsexual issue. And why I see it being pushed so much on the TV and the media is because I think it's trying to feminize the men. Because the people who run society, the politicians, and the government, the control people who control society, they have an incentive to feminize the men, because if you feminize the men, they're less likely to go out there and revolt and fight and throw off tyranny and throw off corruption and do the nitty-gritty that needs to be done to ensure the freedom and existence of the human species. So that's why I see them jumping on this bandwagon of gender pay gap and women's rights and tranny rights, is because I feel they're just trying to feminize people. They're trying to feminize the men. And the science is still out on the tranny issue, the transsexuals. And they get mad when you call them tranny. I mean, Jesus, it's just so crazy. I'm sick of the PG-13, I really am, or the social justice warriors. And the story that I'm going to talk about now, about this, the tranny issue, the transsexual, whatever the hell they want to call themselves. I'm glad that this week, also in the news, there is a story that surfaces of a woman who actually poured bleach or something in her eyes to make herself blind. She could see 100% fine, and then she actually goes and puts bleach in her eyes, tries to blind herself, doesn't 100% get it done correctly, ends up getting admitted to the hospital, and end up going through and fully blinding herself. And the doctor and everyone, I did some Googling. I never even knew this existed until I've actually looked around it when I heard about this story. But there's a thing called body integrity identity disorder. I guess this is a huge thing. Not affecting just one, there's more than just this one woman. There's actually people out there who cut off their legs to become a paraplegic, or cut off their arm, or feel that, like this woman felt that she had to be blind, that she identified as a blind person, and not she had to burn her eyes out with bleach or whatever to make herself blind. Now we look at that as a mental disorder. We have someone who has an arm or a leg or eyes, and they're like, yeah, I shouldn't have these. I'm supposed to be paraplegic. And the doctor's like, no, something's wrong with you. Got a mental disorder there. You actually have legs, and it's not how it's supposed to work. Well, when I look at someone, and I'm not talking about gay, okay? I'm not talking about gay. I'm talking about a male who's 100% a male. His genes are a male. He has an Adam's apple, his mass, his rib cage structure. There's so many more things that just separates the sexes. It's not just some hair and tits and stuff, okay? There's so much right down to the genes and how we act, our brains. There's a lot of differences between the sexes. And when I see a male with an Adam's apple and a penis and all this stuff saying that I'm a woman, I feel like I'm a woman, just like Caitlyn Jenner. Bruce is who it is. He's a guy. Bruce thought he was a woman. Well, guess what, Bruce? Just like this woman thought she was supposed to be blind, and that's deemed a mental illness, just maybe. Now, I'm not giving my opinion either or. I'm just saying the sciences are out, and we shouldn't go encouraging people to chop their dicks off and go through these procedures, and especially young children, which really infuriates me. As you see, I heard a story of a 4 or 5 year old boy going to school, coming home one day, and said to him, "Mommy, I don't really like being a boy." And the moms and dad were like, "Well, that's fine. You can be a girl. We'll put a dress on you, and now you can be a girl." And now they're trying to teach this boy growing up that gender's a social contract, and you can just choose what you want to be boy. And it's not like that. And that pisses me off. They're trying to blur these lines. And someone like Bruce, who's saying, I'm a female, no matter how much plastic surgery he gets done, no matter how much work they do on his cock down there to make it look like a pussy, he will always be a male. Right down to his genes. There's no changing it. It's not a social contract. And maybe, just maybe, I'm not saying yes, but just maybe, could even be a mental illness. Because when we look at a woman who says she's supposed to be blind, mental illness. But we look at a guy who says he's a girl when it's contradictory to reality, and we say that that's okay. Just saying here, guys. Just saying. Just throwing that out there. Maybe instead what they should have said to that boy is, well, you know what, little boy? There's a lot of... being a boy is cool. And sat him down and told him all the good things and cool things that guys do and what we've created and what we've done for the world and all that. And encouraged him, that he is a guy. And taught him to be in reality. That, sorry, you don't want to be a boy, but you have to. It's just the reality of the life you were in, the body you were born in. But instead they try and tell him he's a girl, and now he's probably going to grow up to be having messed up issues in the head now. Maybe he'll go on to take hormones and all these other crappy things that'll mess him up. Maybe he'll get bullied and harassed and teased because he's a guy in a dress and a wig at school. And this has nothing to do with the gay issue. I have gay friends. But these gay guys who like to go and be with other men aren't saying, I'm a woman. They're living in reality. They like to be with a guy, but they're not saying, I physically think I'm a woman. That's totally different than this transsexual issue. And the whole issue where these transsexuals want to be able to go into the women's bathroom because they feel more no, women have every right to backlash against it and say, yeah, we don't feel comfortable with a goddamn man. Who cares if he's got a wig on and a dress and maybe some plastic surgery in here in my bathroom? So I'm behind those women. And what do they do? They even built, South Park even did an episode, they even built individual washrooms for these people to deal with their issues and say, well, here's a personal bathroom, and that wasn't good enough. No, they want to be in the woman's bathroom. It's just fucking sick. It pisses me off. So my stance on the tranny issue is I think the science is still out there. And because the science is still out there, and because we're not 100% sure yet if it is a mental illness, we shouldn't be encouraging it through society the way we are. We shouldn't be propping up Caitlyn Jenner, putting her on the Vogue magazine or whatever the front of the issue is this week, and giving her awards to be the most brave person. Brave? Would you give the woman who burned her eyes out with bleach this week an award for being the most brave person? Or would you do what, like we said, she has a mental illness, try and get her some help? So there's my thoughts on the transsexual issue. I don't really care if it pisses some of you off listening. These are the facts. This is the reality. If you don't want to choose to live in it, that's your own idea. You can have your own beliefs and views. But when you start putting these beliefs and teaching these views to children, well, I have major problems with that. Because now you're going to ruin this poor young boy's life now who's now growing up in a dress. Because his parents told him that gender is a social contract. It's absurd, and the damage that they'll do to that child's mind now, whatever, to his brain, it won't be good. So we talked about feminism, why women make 70 cents on the dollar for men. We talked about the tranny issue now, transsexual issue. So now let's move into another great, very heated topic, which is abortion. Abortion. Now, to me, I have an opinion on it, but I'm not the staunch 100% against it. I think if a woman gets raped and she goes to the hospital the next day or a couple days after and she gets a Plan B pill or whatever the case might be, I think that's fine. Because I think a bunch of clustered cells isn't a human being. I'm not the life at inception person like some religious folks. I don't think as soon as you blow a wad in her that now all of a sudden there's a baby there. Not that way. I understand how biology works. But I'm also not going to jump on the bandwagon like we see today and be such a staunch opponent and support of abortion. Especially up until a month or so when body parts start to form. With this whole issue surrounding Planned Parenthood, they're literally talking about baby parts that they can harvest. And then people want to make the argument that these abortions, that they're not real babies. Well, if they can take a goddamn heart out, if they can get a goddamn leg or a body part, supposedly out of these Planned Parenthood videos, if they can get these body parts, well, obviously there had to have been a body and a baby there. So I don't think after a certain point in time we have to figure that time out. But I think if there's any kind of like an arm grown, a leg grown, an eye, a head, like anything like that you can actually get parts from, that's a baby, and you just committed murder to me. And another major problem I have with abortion is how we got to look at how people get here. If you go and have unprotected sex and you're immature and you go and do a stupid act like that and have unprotected sex with someone and get knocked up at a young age, that's being irresponsible. And I don't think that irresponsible young person should just be able to walk out in the abortion clinic and take her baby out like it's nothing and be like, okay, now I'm just going to go have sex next week and rinse and repeat because I can just get rid of the baby when I want. We can't encourage that much irresponsibility like that, especially in an age where there's a list a mile long of contraceptions. We're not living in the Stone Ages here. So when a woman gets pregnant today and it's not expected and she has to result in an abortion, unless it's a rape case, she's just irresponsible. And I'm sick of women saying, I forgot to take the pill. Or the pill didn't work. The pill's like 99 or 98% effective when used right. And the condom is like 90-some% effective when used right. And I like someone said to me one time, I think one of the philosophers I like to listen to, sex is a grown-up thing to do. Sex creates babies. And you got to take it serious. And today's culture wants to act like, oh, sex is just fun and all that stuff. Yeah, it can be fun if you have all your contraceptions in order. If you don't, you better realize that you're playing with fire if you're not ready to have a child. So I don't think abortion's as soon as you blow your wad in a woman, but I also don't believe we should tell women that abortion is great. I think the way we treat abortion now is fine. Women get mad because they say, oh, well, people look down on us because we got an abortion. Well, they should, because why the hell did you go and get knocked up in the first place when there's patches, when there's pills, when there's condoms, when there's things you can stick inside, when there's a million different ways to not get pregnant, and you got pregnant? What the hell were you doing? You were being irresponsible, and your act of irresponsibility should be called out. So if you had sex with someone and you were unsure that night you might have forgot to take your pill, or the condom, you weren't sure if it might have broke or not, or if it slipped off, and you're like, shit, run and get yourself a plan B pill. Be responsible. That's the problem. And I also hate the fact that why isn't adoption taken into more account? I mean, any life is better than nothing. And studies have shown that babies in adoption do just as well as babies in normal homes. But a woman would rather murder her child, her unborn child, rather than give it to someone else that could give it a good home and a good life, and who knows that may turn into be the next Steve Jobs or astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, or who knows the potential of the people being killed. Every day there's millions of people aborted. Millions of people aborted because of people's stupid, irresponsible sexual acts. With a list of contraceptions a mile long, living in the 21st century, and still getting knocked up and having to get abortions. It's ridiculous. If you got raped that night, plan B. Totally acceptable. If you got raped, the guy kept you captive, you escaped 6 months in, you run to the hospital, doctor, the baby's already most grown in here and I don't want it, it's a rape child. I think abortion. At that point, you have a child who is obviously... Nobody talks about the unborn child's rights. It's all about the women's rights. That's what abortion is and what the whole slogan is. Women's rights, the right to choose. What about the child's rights, the unborn child's rights? And all these people arguing for the women and not for the child's rights, they're alive because they weren't aborted. It's pretty easy to talk shit and talk about, oh, just abort it. Easy for you to say, well, you're alive. Why don't you go kill yourself if nothing or death is so great? So a child out of rape through into the adoption system, that I think is better than nothing. It's better than death. It's better than being aborted and sucked up through a tube or a stake in the head. Without even getting to see the world and the beauty around it and flowers and birds and the sunset and the ocean. No, I don't get that. Bored it. Because I was too stupid to take my pills or tell them to put a condom on that night. So that's pretty much my stance on abortion. That most abortions, I'm generalizing again, but this is why I have a problem with abortions. I'm not generalize. Most abortions today are acts of irresponsibility. And they're taking it into a women's rights issues when it should be like, bitch, put a goddamn condom on your man, take your damn pills. But, you know, they don't want to talk about that. And the government, who runs a lot of the media and has a lot of the control here, what is their incentive to push this shit through the media and push it on the population? Well, because the more people aborted, the less people they got to worry about. The government's all about keeping and remaining their control and their power. That's why they like to feminize the men. That's why they like abortion. That's why they like racism. Anything to divide and conquer. Anything to keep us down and keep us infighting against each other. And missing who the true enemy is of us, which is these slave masters who try and enslave us and who take our freedoms away every day. So we talked about feminization of men. We talked about MRA, feminist, gender pay gap myth. I completely debunked that in this podcast. We talked about the whole transsexuals and whether it may or may not be a mental illness, and we shouldn't be encouraging it, especially on our youth. Talked about that whole body integrity identity disorder. The woman burns her eyeballs out so she can be blind, because in her brain she feels that way. So we talked about all that and how the correlations between that and could be what transsexuals are dealing with. So now we'll go and finish off with our last topic. Might as well, since we talked about abortion and feminists and all these other terrible issues that people don't want to talk about because you're racist, you're sexist, you're misogynist, or whatever the case may be. If you talk about these things, we might as well throw in the last one, which will be racism and IQ, because why not? Why not talk about everything? Why not try and piss everyone off in one podcast? So, racism and IQ. Very interesting when you look at. Because mainstream society will try and tell you that every single person, no matter of their skin tone, is the exact same, and that's not the case when we looked at the sciences. We looked at the facts. And because race was a non-issue for me growing up, I never looked at these facts. I seen a black kid, didn't think anything of it. Seen an Asian, didn't think anything of it. Mexican, didn't think anything of it. Whatever the race may be, didn't matter. Looked at them, hey, another human being. But then they started this race baiting, Black Lives Matter and illegal immigration of the Mexicans and all this other crap. And they started the race baiting. So because of the race baiting, I studied and looked at the facts. It made me look at the race issue. And I've come to the conclusion and realizing, looking at the facts, that not all races are the same. That there are many studies out there showing that the bell curve effect, that there are different averages between the races. Just so like we can generalize and say that black men are better basketball players. Is that racist? Sure. It's also the facts, though. So is the NBA is it a racist organization? No. Just like we can generalize and say men are stronger than women on average, the same way I said blacks make better basketball players. There are differences between the races. So when we look at the idea of IQ, there are differences between the races. In all the studies, it shows that these certain select Jews and stuff like that are the highest, followed by Asians, followed by whites, European whites and whites like myself, followed by your Mexicans and stuff like that, that kind of skin color, and then lastly, blacks. Now, when you say these things, you're immediately labeled racist. You hate blacks, blah, 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 blah. And people got to understand that when we talk about IQ between the races, it's done in generalizations. That's not meaning that every single black person is stupider than every single white person, like some people like to immediately think it means. That's not the case at all. There are a shitload of really dumbass people in all the races. I know personally some really dumbass white boys. And there are definitely some black people that are way above them in IQ. But they would be the above average in their race. Just like when you look at race between the sexes. Might as well talk about this since we're on the topic of IQ between races. Let's talk about IQ between the sexes. When you look at the bell curve, men are more spread out, which means there are more, men can be stupider, but we also have some of the highest IQs on that spectrum. But when you look for females, they tend to be more sparse in the middle of the bell curve. So in general, there are more smart women. That's why they dominate the colleges and stuff like that. And there are more generalized smart women. But when it comes to the far out spectrums of the bell curve, the real stupids and the real smarts, men are at both sides of those categories. Now, feminists will look at the Darwin Awards and how stupid men can be, and men doing stupid ass things like the Jackass series, and putting their heads through windows and just doing stupid things that stupid people do sometimes. Stupid guys will do, and they'll say, look at all these, some of the stupidest guys in the world are men. Yeah, absolutely. But also, if on the other end of the bell curve, some of the smartest people on the planet are men. It's a fact. Let's just look at it throughout history. Who invented the internet? Who invented philosophy? Who invented a lot of the major things? Like I said, cars, automotives, philosophy. Look at Albert Einstein. Just name me. Could you please do this, females? Name me a female that invented something back in history that completely revolutionized the way we think of our society. Because when I think of Albert Einstein and Plato and Socrates and who else do we got here? Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison. All these people that created electricity, whatever the case may be, all the things that brought us to success where we are today, in most cases, were men. Now, women shouldn't look at that as a bad thing. This is just the facts. And if anything, they pull better off. When you look in the middle, there's generally, on average, women tend to be a little bit better that way. But when it comes to your super dumbs and your super smarts, men are on those sides of the bell curve more than women. And this is the same like we're seeing with races as well. There are different IQs between the races as well. Doesn't mean all black people are dumber than all white people. Doesn't mean anything. I'm a white guy, and I'm admitting to you on this podcast that on average an Asian has a higher IQ than myself. Do I now look at Asians and say they're racist? Are white people screaming at Asians that they're racist because they have higher IQs than us? No. We accept it as a fact. Only the black race you see screaming about racism. Well, I guess sometimes you'll see it with the whole immigrant and crisis too. They're saying that that's racist and stuff. But maybe why we see problems in our societies, if you look at, let's look at a black-run country of Africa. How well are they doing? Let's look at the Middle East. How well are they doing? Let's look at Western European nations. How well are they doing? We're doing pretty well. So maybe these differences between the IQs and between the races is what is resulting in the different patterns and structures and stuff we see in the different cultures. And it's generalizing. These are complete generalizations. You will be able to find situations that'll go against that. You will find the super smart black guy. You will find, the super smart, or whatever the case may be. Just because I say these averages, like I said, doesn't mean I all of them are the case. And who knows why this is? We don't really know why these differences are between. We're still studying that. What caused it? Why do an Asian tend to have a higher IQ point than a white person? Why does a white person tend to have a higher IQ point than a black person? We're still figuring that out, but we do know that exists. And people will say, oh, how do you know? They take SIT's scores, and there's many ways to gauge this, and tests and everything like that. Generalized IQ tests and stuff. And you'll hear the black people or anyone else say, well, these are tests done by white men. Well, then please, black men, go do some IQ tests and let everyone else take them. And why is it that black people will call white people racist for pointing this fact out that white people on average have a higher IQ than a black person, but then white people will not say an Asian's racist when on average they have a higher IQ than ourselves, the white person? And like I said, growing up, I didn't even care about racism. It wasn't a non-issue to me. It wasn't until that it's got pushed into the mainstream media and everyone wants to bring it up that now I'm like, okay, you guys want to bring it up? Well, then we'll look at the facts and we'll see what the facts say. And this is what the facts say. If you don't like them, it's too bad, because this is the reality of the situation. But accepting this, then we can start to work on solutions and figure out how it got this way and maybe try to improve it. And I think it's very important to analyze the race and the IQ differences, because then you can understand why cultures are different. Why cultures act differently. But because nobody wants to talk about IQ between the races, because if you do, you're immediately labeled a racist, is why we see these differences between cultures in the Middle East and stuff, and in the black communities, and we see these problems. And this is nothing against any of the races. These are just facts that I'm pointing out. Like I said, if I was so racist against black people, because if I say on average white people have a higher IQ than a black person, if a black person calls me racist, then how come I'm not how come the Asian's not racist? How come I'm totally okay with the fact that an Asian has a higher IQ than me? And we look at this. We make generalizations. We always joke about how Asians are so smart at math and stuff. It's because these are realities that we point out. These stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, just because they're usually based on some kind of facts, like white man can't jump, black people are good at basketball. These stereo generalizations are actually got some factual basis to them. That's why we come up with these generalizations. So if I'm racist for saying that on average white has an higher IQ than a black person, then how do you explain the Asian thing? And it's very interesting to analyze, because when you look at the Asian nations, they tend to be less violent. I mean, look at Hong Kong and Singapore and all these places. They're booming now. These places are booming. A lot of industry and innovation. And that's living under communism. Jesus, give the Asians some goddamn free markets. I might start a new utopia over there. And I also love. Now this is going to be another subject. Now what I'm about to talk about here is definitely going to piss off some people, but who cares? I've already probably pissed off a lot of you anyway. But when you look at the issue of slavery with the black population, because immediately the blacks will bring up to, well, maybe our IQs are lower because we were kept down by the white people. We were slaves for so many years. And there's a radio activist that I love to listen to, and if you guys, I encourage you to check him out. His name is Tommy Sotomayor. He's a black radio host. And he did a video called How Black People Accepted Slavery. How it was a choice. Now, if I go ask any black person in the hood, in Compton, or wherever the place may be, I go and ask any black guy, I said, hey, would you suck this man's dick? Or I shoot you in the head. A lot of them be like, hell no, man, I ain't sucking that guy's dick. You shoot me in the head before I do that. Then why didn't your ancestors, when their women were being taken and raped, when they were being taken as slaves, being forced to work, why was the black population back in slavery days didn't take the stance, give me liberty or give me death? As one of our white counterparts, Thomas Jefferson or whoever who said that quote. Why, when slavery didn't come along, they didn't take the stance that most black people, if asked today, would you suck that, a straight black guy, would you suck that man's dick or I shoot you in the head? Most of them would say, oh, I'll shoot me in the head, man. I ain't doing it. Why then wasn't slavery resisted? Now the natives, when America come over to or when the whites come over to America, and we messed up all the damn or the poor the natives. Why didn't we have native slaves like we had black slaves back then? Because the natives were like, hell no. They took their bows, they took their arrows, and they took all whatever they had, and they were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought. That's why a lot of them got wiped out. It's why the native population just took a major hit. And I truly feel bad for that. But I'm also not going to try and guilt myself because I can't account for what my forefathers did. I was born 20-some years ago, and I can't account for what they've done. That was them. I'm not responsible for their actions. I'm responsible for myself and my actions. But I just point out that the natives fought like a motherfucker. They resisted that shit. They're like, hell no, I ain't taking slavery. You can skin me. I don't give a shit. You can do whatever you want. You can kill me. I am not going to be a slave. Just like when the Greeks, the Persians rolled up in the movie 300, and I love all those historical movies. And they fought. They were outnumbered. The Persians were outnumbered, or the Greeks were outnumbered by the Persians by massive amounts. And they said, hell no, I'm fighting to the death. I'd rather die than be your slave. So if you have that attitude, slavery doesn't exist because, well, what are they going to do? Is it really worth it for the white man to went and just killed all the people because they wouldn't obey? Well, they would eventually give up because they're not going to get any workers out of that. It isn't going to work. So like Tommy Sotomayor, the black radio activist, says in his video, maybe slavery was a choice. Now, if you look at the race and IQ differences now if you start looking at the facts, the things that they didn't know back then because they didn't have all the research and scientists and psychologists and all the stuff that we have now today to look at these issues, maybe what we were simply seeing is an average higher IQ race trying to dominate over a lower average IQ race. Now, when you say that, they say, oh, what are you saying? All those black people were dumb. Well, think about the black Africans who sold fellow blacks into slavery to send over in those ships. It wasn't just white slavery back then. Blacks had slaves too. And there's a lot of Africans that didn't leave, who didn't go on the ships. And maybe those were the higher IQ ones, and maybe those were the ones who were more resistant and fighting tyranny. And maybe these are all hypotheticals, okay? I'm just talking here. But a lot of the talk here has some facts behind it. There are some correlations. And I think if we look at these things, then maybe that can explain it. Maybe that's why that happened. And that happened in our period of time. But you're a racist if you talk about this stuff. But yet my best friend's black. But I'm a racist. So what? I don't really care anyway if people call me racist. Because these are the facts. These are the things I enjoy pointing out. And they make a lot of sense to me. And I hate how blacks talk about as if they are the only people enslaved through history. Ever heard of the Irish slave trade? Look at China and go look at the Mongols and stuff. There was lots of slavery of different races all throughout history. All the races at some point in time were slaves to a race or something, or to their own race. Jesus, we can make the argument we're slaves today. To the tax slaves, to the corporate America and corporate governments. Just don't be so naive to just not want to talk about these things. To immediately shut conversation down. Oh, racist. When you throw racist out like that and you don't look at the facts, it's a cop-out. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson's a prime example. Very smart astrophysicist. And he's black. So when I say whites on average have higher IQ than black people, we're talking in generalities here. Now, I would like more research done, but most people can't do research into this because immediately if they start to do some type of research, they're labeled a racist, and they're really ridiculed in their line of work, and they don't get the funding and stuff. But I would like to see why this is the case. Why is it that the Jews tend to have the white Jews, certain select, tend to have a higher IQ, the highest IQ? Was it because back in history they gave a lot of the finance duties, and a lot of the kings who just wanted to run their country but needed someone to do the finances and the bookwork, they usually gave those job positions to these Jews. Maybe that's what helped breed along their good mathematical skills and bookkeeping. I don't know. I want research done into that stuff so we can know. And I hate that people just label people racist. And it stifles research into these important areas, I feel. So, I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. I mean, I've already talked enough controversy, and we're rolling up on an hour here. So, I mean, what a controversial podcast. Feminization of men, MRA versus feminism, gender pay gap, races and the IQs, racism and race between the IQs between the races, IQs between the sexes. We talked about all the stuff that they're not allowed to talk about on mainstream media. So this is why you should be subscribed to this channel and thumbs up. And even if you don't agree with and like my views, hey, it's cool to hear opposing views and sit on them and think them over and try and prove me wrong. Pull me an article or pull me some study or go to a local college and take all the SAT scores from 100, whatever the case may be, each race, and do your own research and see. But don't just label me a racist, because I'm not. And don't just label me a sexist and transsexual, because I could care less what any of these people do in their lives. But a lot of the time, policies get created and it affects people's lives by how this stuff gets talked and debated. There's actually now policies and laws to make women try and get paid more when there's no gender pay gap. We have a Black Lives Matter movement when the people who treat black people the worst are their own race. Nobody talks about the black on black violence, only when a white guy does something. And I'm just sick of that. I'm sick of the PG, the social justice warriors, and everything trying to be blurred, and men are not men and women are not women. We're all just together. We're social contracts. You can be a boy, you can be a girl. There's no difference between the races. Well, there are major differences, and we should embrace our differences. It doesn't mean we're any worse than each other. We're just unique and different. We all bring good qualities to the world. So I think we need to address these issues, talk about these topics, put them in the forefront, try and get them discussed in the mainstream, and see how we can address them and try to make the world a better place. Because right now, it is the best times, the worst time, and there's a lot of crap going on. That's why I do these podcasts, to try and get the word out as little, do as much as I can, and really, I feel I'm doing too little. Could do more. And an end goal, I would love to turn this podcast into a more professional thing, into like a radio podcast where I can bring in guests and bring in experts. But everything starts small and starts in baby steps. Nobody becomes successful overnight. It's just like Steve Jobs. He didn't wake up one day the CEO of Apple. There was many nights of hard work. And I know the road put in front of me to get me to those steps. But I'm starting, and hopefully this podcast will morph into something beautiful and big, and hopefully this will be the news stations of the future, our kind of podcasts and stuff, because places like CNN and TV news is starting to die off, and the internet's taking over. And it's less controlled, and there's more ideas and information out there. So if you enjoyed this podcast, support it. I'm going to try and set up a way that I can take donations so I can try to better improve the program, to buy better equipment. Because right now I'm just got a microphone speaking in my room. So it's pretty low key, pretty nonchalant, non-expensive. But I feel that I have to talk about these ideas and issues. So, this was episode 4 of the Anarchist podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll see you guys in episode 5. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button. Encourage me. I'm not quite sure exactly what day that podcast will come out. But we will see. Stay tuned for it. So subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Hope you guys enjoyed.